Ever found yourself scrolling through social media, only to stumble into an argument that leaves your heart racing and your fingers itching to type out a furious reply? Maybe it's a heated political debate, a clash over personal values, or even something as trivial as whether pineapple belongs on pizza. In those moments, emotions take over, and before you know it, you're locked in a battle of words, one that rarely leaves anyone feeling victorious. But what if there was a way to rise above the chaos, to remain unshaken while others lose their composure? That's where Stoic thinking comes in. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Those words weren't just advice for ancient rulers. They're a blueprint for navigating modern conflicts with grace and quiet confidence. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions or avoiding disagreements. It's about mastering your reactions, so no matter how heated the argument gets, you stay grounded in reason rather than swept away by anger or pride. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a debate wishing you'd handled it differently? Maybe you said something you regretted, or let someone else's words rattle you long after the conversation ended. Stoic thinking flips the script. Instead of reacting impulsively, you learn to pause, reflect, and respond with clarity, turning every argument into an opportunity to demonstrate strength, not just through words, but through unwavering composure. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. 20 ways Stoic thinking silently wins every modern argument. These aren't tricks or manipulation tactics. They're timeless principles that help you disarm conflict, protect your peace, and often, without saying a word, come out ahead. Whether it's a tense workplace discussion, a family disagreement, or the endless noise of online debates, these tools will help you stay centered while others unravel. So, if you're ready to transform the way you engage with conflict, to argue less and influence more, then let's begin. Because the real victory isn't in proving someone wrong, it's in staying unshaken, no matter how hard the storm blows. Stoics win arguments by ignoring what they can't change. It sounds simple, but this is the foundation of every silent victory, the core idea Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. He taught that some things are within our power, like our judgments and actions, while everything else, other people's opinions, past mistakes, even the outcome of an argument, isn't. Picture this: you're in a team meeting and a colleague dismisses your idea with a sarcastic remark. Your pulse quickens and the urge to fire back rises. But here's where Stoic thinking shifts the game. Instead of wasting energy on their tone or attitude, things you can't control, you focus solely on refining your point with clarity and patience. You don't need their approval to stay composed. This principle doesn't just apply to work. Imagine a holiday dinner where a relative brings up a touchy subject. You could engage, trying to change their mind, or you could recognize that their beliefs aren't yours to control. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, the real power lies in choosing where to direct your attention. The next time you're in a heated discussion, pause and ask yourself, what here is truly mine to influence? The other person's emotions, their stubbornness, no, but your breath, your words, your ability to listen, those are yours. Try this exercise before your next disagreement. Jot down 3 things outside your control, like the other person's mood or past biases, and 3 things within it, such as your tone or willingness to understand. When you anchor yourself in what you can change, something remarkable happens. The argument loses its grip on you. You stop playing by the other person's rules and start operating from unshakable ground. That's how Stoics turn conflict into clarity, not by winning the debate, but by refusing to let it shake them in the first place. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, offered a piece of advice that's deceptively simple yet life-changing. If you would not be angry, do not be provoked. In other words, the gap between what happens and how you respond is where your power lies. Most arguments escalate not because of the topic itself, but because we react instead of respond. There's a critical difference. A reaction is instant, heated, and often defensive, like slamming on the horn when someone cuts you off in traffic. Your pulse spikes, your grip tightens on the wheel, and suddenly, a minor inconvenience becomes a full-blown confrontation. But a response that's deliberate, it's the deep breath you take before speaking, the moment you choose empathy over ego. Think about the last time someone said something that set you off. Maybe it was a passive-aggressive comment from a coworker or a dismissive remark from a friend. In that split second, you had a choice: fire back with equal intensity or pause long enough to craft something wiser. Stoics call this the discipline of assent, the practice of not letting your first impulse dictate your actions. Imagine your mind as a courtroom. Every provocation, every sharp word is just evidence presented to you. You don't have to accept it as truth. You can weigh it, question it, and only then decide how to proceed. This is where journaling becomes a secret weapon. The Stoics were relentless about writing down their thoughts, not to dwell on them, but to dissect them. Try this. After your next disagreement, grab a notebook and answer 3 questions. 1. What emotion did I feel in that moment? 2. Was that emotion justified, or was it clouding my judgment? 3. What would a calmer, wiser version of me have said? You'll start to notice patterns, triggers that hijack your rationality, old wounds that make you defensive. The more you reflect, the easier it becomes to spot those traps before you fall into them. Here's the real test. When has reacting ever improved an argument? Think back. Maybe you won the point but left the conversation feeling hollow, or worse, damaged a relationship over something trivial. Now imagine the alternative. What if, instead of meeting anger with anger, you'd asked a clarifying question? What if you'd said, "Help me understand why you feel that way," and actually listen? That's the Stoic shift. It's not about swallowing your pride or letting others walk over you. It's about recognizing that your peace is too valuable to be stolen by someone else's carelessness. The next time tension rises, remember, you're not a puppet whose strings get pulled by every provocation. You're the one holding the scissors. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of zooming out, way out. He'd imagine himself floating high above the earth, gazing down at bustling cities, winding rivers, and the vast expanse of human activity. From that vantage point, the arguments, the grudges, the desperate need to be right, all of it shrank into near insignificance. He called this the view from above, and it's one of the most liberating tools Stoicism offers for modern conflicts. Picture yourself in the middle of a heated debate. Your heart's pounding, your jaws clenched, and every fiber of your being is screaming to prove your point. Now hit pause. Imagine pulling back, not just from the room, but from the building, the neighborhood, the continent, until you're seeing the entire planet, silent and suspended in space. How important does that argument feel now? This isn't about dismissing your feelings or pretending problems don't matter. It's about recalibrating your perspective. In Meditations, Marcus writes, "Keep before your eyes the rapidity with which all things vanish, their bodies into the world, their memories into time." Translation: the things we fight over today will barely register in the long arc of our lives, let alone history. That co-worker who nitpicks your ideas. The relative who always picks political fights at Thanksgiving, viewed from cosmic distance, their behavior is just a fleeting ripple in an endless ocean. Here's the challenge. Think back to a conflict that felt earth-shattering in the moment, maybe a friendship fractured over a misunderstanding or a public embarrassment that kept you awake at night. Now replay it with a view from above. Does it still carry the same weight? Chances are, what stung so sharply then now feels more like a speck of dust on a grand tapestry. That's the power of this practice. It doesn't just diffuse arguments, it reveals how often we pour our energy into battles that, in the end, won't even be footnotes in our story. Try this tonight before bed. Take 5 minutes to mentally revisit a recent disagreement. But this time, visualize it as if you're watching from space, two tiny figures on a pale blue dot, voices rising over issues that, in the cosmic scheme, are barely whispers. Notice how your grip on the emotion loosens. That's the Stoic secret. When you stop conflating minor skirmishes with existential wars, you stop handing others the power to unsettle you. The view from above doesn't just win arguments, it makes most of them irrelevant. What if you lost this argument, really lost it, not just a minor setback, but a full, humiliating defeat where your point was dismantled, your logic mocked, and your pride left in tatters? Most of us avoid even considering that possibility. We walk into debates armored with certainty, convinced our perspective is unshakable, but Stoics do the opposite. They actively visualize failure, not to feed fear, but to strip it of its power. This practice is called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it's one of the most counterintuitive yet liberating tools in Stoic philosophy. Take a heated workplace debate, for example. You're about to present a proposal you've spent weeks refining. Instead of rehearsing only your winning points, the Stoic approach asks, what if the room rejects it outright? What if your boss dismisses your idea with a wave of their hand, or a colleague tears it apart with ruthless criticism? By sitting with that discomfort before it happens, something remarkable occurs. The sting of potential failure dulls. You realize that even the worst-case scenario, total rejection, isn't a catastrophe. It's just data, feedback, a chance to refine your thinking or pivot to a better solution. Seneca, in his letters, put it bluntly, what is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. Translation: surprise amplifies suffering, but when you've already walked through the fire in your mind, the actual flames feel less intense. Here's how to apply this today. Before your next high-stakes conversation, whether it's asking for a raise, defending a controversial opinion, or even navigating a family dispute, spend 5 minutes visualizing the worst possible outcome. Not to dwell on it, but to interrogate it. Would it truly destroy you, or would it simply be uncomfortable, temporary, and maybe even instructive? Seneca wrote extensively about adversity as a teacher, arguing that the blows we fear often reveal our hidden strengths. A failed argument might show you where your logic was flawed. A harsh critique could highlight blind spots you'd missed. Even humiliation, that universal dread, fades faster than we expect. Now shift the lens further. Ask yourself, how would my approach change if this were the last discussion I'd ever have on this topic? Would you still cling so tightly to being right? Or would you prioritize listening, understanding, and leaving the conversation with dignity intact? Negative visualization isn't about pessimism, it's about clarity. When you stop treating every disagreement as a life or death battle, you start seeing it for what it really is, an exchange of ideas, not a measure of your worth. The next time tension rises, remember, the Stoics didn't brace for worst-case scenarios to suffer twice. They did it to ensure they'd only suffer once, and even then, only if absolutely necessary. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, defined philosophy as nothing more than the love of wisdom. not the love of winning, not the love of applause, not the love of crushing opponents in debate. Just wisdom, raw, unflinching, and often uncomfortable truth. That distinction changes everything when it comes to arguments. Most of us enter debates like gladiators stepping into an arena, armed with talking points and ready to fight for our reputation. But Stoics enter them like scientists in a lab, testing hypotheses, discarding flawed logic, and embracing whatever evidence reveals. The moment you shift from "I need to win" to "I need to understand," you've already outmaneuvered anyone still trapped in ego. Think of Socrates, the original philosophical troublemaker. He didn't lecture or dominate discussions. He asked relentless questions, not to corner people, but to expose gaps in his own thinking as much as theirs. His famous method was a form of intellectual humility in action. Imagine applying that today. Someone makes a claim you disagree with, and instead of reflexively countering, you ask, "What's the strongest evidence for your view?" Or, "Where might my perspective be incomplete?" That simple pivot transforms a battle into a shared search for clarity. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I'll gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." Now reflect, when was the last time you changed your mind mid-argument? If the answer is rarely or never, that's a red flag. It suggests you've been prioritizing victory over growth. Here's a quick litmus test. In your most recent disagreement, did you leave with new insight or just the satisfaction of holding your ground? The internet is littered with debates where both sides walk away more entrenched than ever, not because the truth was elusive, but because no one was truly looking for it. Consider a modern example: vaccine debates, political polarization, or even workplace conflicts. The loudest voices are often those least interested in nuance. But Stoics operate differently. They're the ones asking, "What if I'm partially wrong?" Or, "What can this person teach me, even if I disagree with 90% of their stance?" That openness isn't weakness, it's strategic strength. When you're the only person in the room unafraid to say, "I hadn't considered that," you disarm opponents and gain something far more valuable than a cheap win: wisdom. Try this exercise today. Pick a belief you hold strongly, maybe a political stance, a parenting philosophy, or even a trivial opinion like the best way to load a dishwasher. Now seek out the most compelling counterargument you can find. Not the straw man version, but the smartest, most respectful case against your view. Sit with it. Wrestle with it, and if you find even one hole in your own logic, celebrate that as progress. That's Stoic truth-seeking in action, because the goal isn't to collect trophies from defeated opponents. It's to emerge from every conversation, win or lose, a little less wrong than before. In a courtroom, the most powerful moments often come when the lawyer stops talking. That deliberate pause before a cross-examination, the quiet after a damning piece of evidence, is presented. It's in those silences that tension builds, minds change, and truth emerges. Stoics understood this same principle centuries ago. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a tactical tool, a way to reclaim control when emotions run high. Epictetus put it bluntly, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak." But here's the twist: Stoic silence isn't passive. It's not about shrinking back or surrendering. It's about choosing not to pour fuel on a fire that doesn't deserve your oxygen. Picture this: you're tagged in a social media thread where 2 people are locked in a bitter argument. The comments are escalating, insults are flying, and the original point has long been buried. You could jump in, armed with facts and logic, or you could do the unexpected, say nothing. Not out of indifference, but because you recognize that some battles are designed to drain you, not enlighten anyone. The Stoic knows that words are precious. Wasting them on people who aren't listening is like watering a stone and expecting flowers. This plays out just as powerfully offline. Imagine a coworker who constantly interrupts you in meetings, eager to dismiss your ideas. Instead of matching their energy, you let their words hang in the air. You don't rush to fill the silence. Often, that quiet space becomes uncomfortable for them, forcing them to confront their own aggression. Meanwhile, you've maintained your composure, and everyone in the room notices. Silence, wielded well, can be more disarming than the sharpest rebuttal. Think back to a conflict where you stayed quiet when every instinct told you to retaliate. Maybe it was a family gathering where a provocative comment was lobbed your way, or a friend who tried to bait you into an old grievance. What happened when you didn't take the bait? Chances are the tension fizzled out faster than if you'd engaged. That's the paradox. Sometimes the strongest stance is to step back and let the other person wrestle with their own noise. Try this experiment. Next time someone tries to drag you into a pointless argument, practice the Stoic pause. Count to 5 in your head before responding, or don't respond at all. Observe how the dynamic shifts when you refuse to play the game, because silence isn't surrender. It's the ultimate power move. Marcus Aurelius had a habit of dissecting his emotions like a scientist examining a specimen under glass. In his private writings, he would meticulously label what he felt. This is not pain, only discomfort. Or, what I call anger is actually fear in disguise. He called this practice name it to claim it, and it's one of the most effective ways Stoicism gives us to diffuse heated arguments before they escalate. Modern psychology backs this up too. Therapists call it affect labeling, and brain scans show that simply putting words to emotions reduces their intensity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. Seneca put it even more plainly. Diseases diagnosed are half cured. Here's how it works in practice. Imagine you're in a team meeting, and your manager dismisses your proposal with a curt, "We've tried that before." Your face grows hot, your hands tense, classic signs of anger. But what if, instead of reacting, you pause to label the emotion silently? This isn't just anger. It's frustration because I spent hours on this, and embarrassment because others heard the rejection. The moment you do that, something shifts. The emotion loses its vague, overwhelming power and becomes a specific thing you can handle. You might even realize that beneath the anger lies a quieter fear. What if they think I'm not competent? Now you're no longer fighting a shadowy monster. You're addressing a clear, manageable concern. Try this challenge today. The next time someone says something that triggers you, whether it's a snippy text from a partner or a condescending remark from a stranger, describe the emotion aloud or write it down with precision. Not just "I'm mad," but "I feel disrespected because my effort wasn't acknowledged." Or, "This anxiety comes from fearing I'll look foolish." The more granular you get, the more control you regain. Ancient Stoics didn't have fMRI machines, but they understood what neuroscience now confirms. Emotions thrive in the dark. Shine a light on them by naming them, and their grip loosens. This isn't about suppressing what you feel. It's about refusing to let undefined emotions hijack your actions. Think of a time you snapped at someone and later regretted it. Chances are, in that heated moment, you weren't fully aware of what you were feeling, just that it was intense. Labeling changes that. It creates a tiny gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap lies your power to choose. Seneca wrote, "The man who has recognized his emotion is already half cured of it." So the next time tension rises, don't just feel it, define it, because the emotions you can name are the ones you can master. What if they're right, not partially right, not right in their own way, but fully, undeniably correct, and you're the one who's missed the mark? That question, as uncomfortable as it feels, is where Stoic empathy begins. The ancient Stoics didn't just tolerate opposing views, they actively sought them out, not to dismantle them, but to test their own thinking. Cato the Younger, a Stoic statesman known for his unshakable principles, was famous for this. In Rome's heated Senate debates, he'd listen intently to his fiercest rivals, not to prepare a rebuttal, but to ask himself, could their criticism reveal a flaw in my position? Imagine applying that level of intellectual humility today. Instead of bracing for your turn to speak in an argument, what if you genuinely listened not just to the words, but to the reasoning behind them? Hierocles, another Stoic philosopher, introduced a concept called the circle of concern. He described our relationships as concentric circles, the inner ring representing ourselves, the next our family, then friends, community, and eventually all of humanity. The goal, he argued, is to continually draw those outer circles inward, to see strangers as neighbors and opponents as teachers. When you're locked in disagreement, this mindset shifts everything. That person on the other side of the debate isn't just an obstacle to your victory. They're a human with experiences and logic that shaped their stance. Even if their conclusion is wrong, their path there might hold a truth you've overlooked. Consider a modern example: two colleagues arguing over a project's direction. One pushes for innovation, the other for tradition. The Stoic approach, before defending your own view, summarized the other person's case so well they'd nod in agreement. You're worried that rushing into new methods could disrupt what's already working, and that stability matters for our team's morale. Is that right? Suddenly, the tension transforms. They feel heard, and you might notice their argument contains a risk you hadn't weighed. That's the power of Stoic empathy. It doesn't just diffuse conflict, it often reveals common ground hidden beneath the noise. Here's a challenge. Think back to your last major disagreement. What's one valid point your opponent made that you initially dismissed? Maybe it was buried under hyperbole or delivered with a tone that put you on guard, but strip that away. Was there a kernel of insight there? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." When you start treating arguments as exchanges of perspectives rather than battles of truths, you gain something rare: the ability to walk away wiser, even if the other person never changes their mind. Because the real win isn't convincing them, it's emerging with a sharper, more nuanced understanding than you had before. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was notorious for his brevity. When a student once rambled through a long-winded question, Zeno responded with just 4 words, fewer words, more meaning. That exchange captures the essence of Stoic communication, cutting through noise to deliver clarity. In an age where arguments often drown in paragraphs of text, emojis, and emotional punctuation, Stoic thinking offers a radical alternative: the power of saying less to mean more. Consider the difference between "you always interrupt me and it's so disrespectful" and "I'd like to finish my thought." The first version pours gasoline on the conflict, the second disarms it with surgical precision. Epictetus warned, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, yet we fill the air with unnecessary words." Modern arguments amplify this imbalance. Social media rewards volume over wisdom, and face-to-face debates spiral when emotions hijack our vocabulary. But Stoics train themselves to speak like archers, every word an arrow aimed at truth, not ego. Imagine rewriting your last heated text exchange in 10 words or fewer. Could you distill the core of your message without the blame, the sarcasm, the defensive flourishes? The exercise forces you to separate what matters from what merely inflames. This isn't about becoming robotic or suppressing emotion. It's about recognizing that language is a tool, and like any tool, its power depends on how you wield it. A chef doesn't use a cleaver to slice herbs. A Stoic doesn't use 1,000 words where 10 will do. Take Marcus Aurelius's journal entries, pages of profound insight condensed into sentences so tight they feel chiseled in stone. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That line could have filled volumes, but its brevity is what makes it unforgettable. Try this reframe next time tension rises. Before speaking, ask, does this add clarity or just heat? If you're describing someone's behavior, replace "you never listen" with "I feel unheard." If defending a position, swap "that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard" for "help me understand the risks." Minimalism in language isn't weakness, it's the quiet strength of someone who knows that the loudest voice rarely wins the most meaningful battles. As Seneca wrote, speech is the mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so he is. When your words carry weight without the weightiness, you don't just win arguments, you elevate them. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher born into slavery, had a limp, a physical weakness that most would hide or resent. But when a bully once taunted him by mocking his gait, Epictetus didn't flinch. Instead, he paused, looked the man in the eye, and replied with a grin, "And do you think I'd be bothered if you called me slow when my leg already proves it?" The insult collapsed under its own weight. What could have been a moment of humiliation became a masterclass in reframing. That's the Stoic secret. Criticism only stings when you let it define you. Modern arguments are full of these barbs, backhanded compliments, sarcastic jabs, outright attacks. Most of us react in one of two ways. We either fire back with equal venom, or we retreat, letting the words fester long after the conversation ends. Stoics choose a third path. They treat insults like a chef treats a tough cut of meat, not as something to reject, but as material to tenderize and transform. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." In other words, when someone throws dirt, you don't throw it back. You use it to plant something. Think about celebrity roasts for a moment. The funniest targets aren't the ones who squirm or retaliate. They're the ones who laugh loudest at their own flaws. Why? Because they've already accepted what others are mocking. That's the power of preemptive self-awareness. When you've examined your own weaknesses long before anyone points them out, criticism loses its bite. Imagine applying that to your next workplace review or family argument. Instead of defending your ego, you'd ask, what part of this might be true? Even if 90% of the insult is noise, that remaining 10% could be gold, a clue to blind spots you'd never noticed. Here's the challenge. Sometime this week, thank someone who criticizes you, not sarcastically, not passively, but with genuine curiosity. Say, "I hadn't considered that, tell me more." Watch how it disarms them. More importantly, watch how it frees you. Because the moment you stop treating feedback as a threat, you start seeing it for what it really is, free coaching from an unlikely source. As Marcus reminded himself in Meditations, you can always stand to benefit from correction if you're willing to listen. The insults that once knocked you down can become the very tools that lift you higher. Past grudges poison current debates like old wine turned to vinegar. What once might have been rich with meaning now only leaves a bitter aftertaste. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They called it premeditatio temporis, the meditation on time's fleeting nature, and it's the antidote to dragging yesterday's battles into today's conversations. Picture a family dinner where Uncle Joe brings up that Thanksgiving from 5 years ago when you stormed out over a political comment. The table tenses, forks hover midair, and suddenly, the present moment is hijacked by a ghost of an argument no one even remembers clearly. But here's the Stoic shift. What if, instead of rehashing that old script, you anchored yourself firmly in the now, not by ignoring history, but by refusing to let it dictate the terms of engagement? Mindful listening is the secret weapon here. When you're fully present, you catch nuances you'd otherwise miss: the hesitation in someone's voice, the unspoken worry beneath their words. Seneca wrote, "Life is long if you know how to use it." He wasn't talking about adding years to your life, but depth to your moments. Think about the last time you argued while mentally replaying past grievances. How much did you actually hear? Chances are you were too busy drafting your rebuttal based on last year's fight to notice the new fear or hope hidden in their tone. Presence isn't just about being physically there. It's about showing up with fresh eyes and an uncluttered mind. Try this experiment at your next tense gathering. When a familiar argument starts brewing, pause and ask yourself, is this about what's happening right now, or am I reacting to an old wound? Then, surprise everyone, including yourself, by responding only to what was just said, not the echoes of 100 previous clashes. It's like clearing cache from your mental browser. Suddenly, the conversation runs smoother. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He'd remind himself, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. Morbid, maybe, but also liberating. When you treat each interaction as if it could be your last, you stop wasting time rehearsing old grievances and start hearing what's actually being said. So here's the challenge. What argument keeps resurfacing in your life because you're stuck in the past? Is it really about the dishes left in the sink, or the time your partner forgot your anniversary 3 years ago? The coworker's lazy report, or the promotion they got over you last spring? Stoic presence doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means choosing deliberately to meet each conversation as if it were new. Because the only moment you can ever truly change someone's mind, or have your own changed, is this one. Right now. Cold showers and debate preparation might seem unrelated until you grasp the Stoic link between them. Both are forms of voluntary discomfort, deliberate trials that train you to stay steady when life gets uncomfortable. Epictetus, who taught philosophy while enduring the hardships of slavery, put it bluntly, difficulties show what men are. He didn't mean suffering for its own sake, but choosing to face small challenges so bigger ones won't break you. Think of it like a marathon runner training on hills. The burn in their legs today isn't punishment. It's preparation for the moment in mile 20 when their body begs to quit. That's the Stoic approach to conflict. You don't wait for the argument to test your patience, you build it in advance, one cold shower at a time. This principle flips modern comfort culture on its head. We avoid drafts, mute critics, and curate echo chambers where no one disagrees with us. But Stoics seek out friction, not because they enjoy it, but because they know ease weakens resilience. Imagine two colleagues receiving the same harsh feedback. One crumbles, defensive and rattled. The other listens, nods, and asks clarifying questions. The difference isn't intelligence, it's tolerance for discomfort. The second person has conditioned their mind like a muscle through daily micro-challenges. Maybe they journal through frustration instead of venting, or sit with silence instead of filling it with nervous chatter. Here's how to apply this today. Pick one minor discomfort, something you'd normally avoid, and lean into it. Skip the snooze button and stand barefoot on cold tile for 30 seconds. Read an article that challenges your beliefs without mentally rebutting every line. Even something as simple as pausing before answering a text trains you to resist the itch for instant reaction. These aren't just random acts of toughness, they're rehearsals for life's real debates. When you're used to discomfort, someone's raised voice or sarcastic comment feels like a drizzle, not a storm. Epictetus's students trained by wearing thin cloaks in winter and sleeping on hard beds not to punish themselves, but to remember that happiness isn't tied to external conditions. Modern life offers endless buffers against discomfort, from heated seats to algorithmically filtered opinions. But the Stoic question remains, what are you sacrificing for that comfort? The ability to stay calm under fire, the courage to admit when you're wrong. Today's voluntary discomfort is tomorrow's unshakable poise. So ask yourself, what small challenge can you embrace, not to prove anything to others, but to remind yourself that you're stronger than your cravings for ease? The answer might just redefine what winning an argument means to you. In a courtroom, the most compelling cases hinge on one thing: evidence. Not assumptions, not hearsay, but cold, hard facts. A skilled lawyer knows the difference between what can be proven and what's merely inferred, because that distinction wins cases. Stoics apply the same rigor to everyday arguments. They separate what happened from the story they tell themselves about it. Marcus Aurelius called this seeing things as they are, not as we've labeled them. Take a simple exchange. Your partner forgets to text you back. The raw fact: their phone showed no reply. The interpretation: they don't care. The first is undeniable. The second is a narrative we layer on top, often without realizing it. This distinction might seem subtle, but it's the difference between reacting and overreacting. Imagine two co-workers passing you in the hallway without saying hello. The Stoic pauses and asks, is the fact that they walked by silently, or is it that they ignored me? One is observable reality, the other is a guess about their intentions. Epictetus drilled this into his students. It's not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That colleague might have been preoccupied with a personal crisis or simply didn't see you. When we confuse our interpretations for facts, we turn neutral events into emotional landmines. Here's the practice. Next time you feel slighted, replay the event like a detective reviewing footage. Strip away the adjectives, the tone, the "they obviously meant to." What's left? Just the bare bones of what occurred. Marcus wrote in Meditations, "Don't let the force of an impression sweep you off your feet." Say to it, "Hold on, let me see who you are and what you represent." That pause, that refusal to let an assumption masquerade as truth, is where Stoic clarity begins. Try this today. Pick a recent moment where you felt wronged. Maybe a friend cancelled plans last minute, or a comment online felt like a personal jab. Now rewrite it 3 ways. First, state only the indisputable facts. They cancelled 2 hours before. Next, list possible neutral interpretations. Their schedule changed, they're overwhelmed. Finally, acknowledge your emotional interpretation. They don't value our friendship. Seeing all 3 side by side reveals how often we leap to the worst conclusion without evidence. The Stoic doesn't ignore their feelings, they just refuse to let unchallenged stories dictate them. Because when you stop conflating facts with fears, you stop handing others the power to ruin your day. Not all battles deserve your energy. The Stoics had a word for things that fall into this category: adiaphora, meaning indifference. These aren't matters of right or wrong, good or evil, but trivialities that simply don't merit your attention or emotional investment. Imagine scrolling through your phone and stumbling upon a heated online debate about whether a celebrity's outfit was stylish or a fashion disaster. The comments are furious, the takes are scorching, and for a moment you feel the urge to weigh in. But here's the Stoic pause. Does this conversation change anything? Will your opinion alter the course of someone's life, or is it just noise masquerading as importance? Seneca saw this trap clearly 2,000 years ago. He wrote, "You live as if you were destined to live forever. No thought of your frailty ever enters your head. Of how much time has already gone by you take no heed." You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply, though all the while that day which you bestow on some person or thing is perhaps your last. In other words, every minute spent on trivia is a minute stolen from what truly matters. That's not to say Stoics never engage in lightheartedness, they just refuse to let the trivial hijack their peace. Think back to your last week. What unimportant debate drained you? Was it defending your favorite sports team to a stranger online, arguing over the correct way to fold towels? Even seemingly serious discussions, like dissecting a politician's gaffe or a co-worker's tone in an email, often crumble under scrutiny when we ask, does this actually affect my ability to live virtuously? The answer is usually no. Here's the litmus test. When you feel the heat of an argument rising, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Will this matter in a month? 2. Does my stance here align with my deepest values or just my ego? 3. Could this energy be directed toward something meaningful instead? Most conflicts fail all 3. The Stoic doesn't ignore life's irritations, they simply refuse to crown them with attention they haven't earned. Because the quieter you grow about things that don't matter, the louder you become about things that do. Cato the Younger walked through Rome's Senate not as a man seeking approval, but as one guided by an unshakable compass. While others flattered the powerful or adjusted their principles to win favor, Cato stood firm, even when it cost him politically. Plutarch recounts how he once refused to remove his toga before entering a bathhouse, declaring, "I will not bear my integrity along with my clothes." That's the essence of Stoic virtue, doing what's right because it's right, not because it earns admiration. Today, we call this virtue signaling, the performative display of morality without the substance, and Stoicism offers the antidote, leading with quiet integrity over loud validation. Consider 2 people donating to charity. One posts a selfie with the donation receipt, tagging the organization and adding a heartfelt caption. The other gives anonymously, their left hand unaware of what their right hand is doing, as the ancient saying goes. Both actions help, but only one is free from the hunger for external praise. Epictetus cuts to the heart of it. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. In other words, the moment you prioritize how you're perceived over what you actually contribute, you've traded virtue for vanity. This plays out in modern conflicts constantly. Think of a workplace debate where someone passionately champions diversity initiatives not because they genuinely care, but because they want to be seen as progressive. Or a social media activist who shares every trending cause yet never volunteers or donates. Stoics don't confuse visibility with virtue. They measure their ethics by private actions, not public applause. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world yet wrote in his private journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one, no audience required." Here's the challenge, reflect on your last week. When did you choose the harder, quieter path over the one that would have drawn praise? Maybe it was resisting the urge to correct someone's minor mistake just to show off your knowledge. Or opting out of gossip even when it would have made you the center of attention. These small, invisible choices are where character is built, not in grand gestures broadcast for likes, but in the daily discipline of aligning your actions with your values, even when no one's watching. Because the Stoic knows this truth, integrity isn't what you do when others are looking. It's what you do when you're certain no one ever will. Sometimes the strongest move is exit. Not surrender, not defeat, but a deliberate step back, like a chess grandmaster resigning a doomed game to preserve energy for the next match. The Stoics called this strategic withdrawal, and it's light years away from cowardice. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, leave other people's mistakes where they lie. He didn't mean ignore injustice. He meant recognizing when engagement only fuels the fire without illuminating anything. Picture a chessboard. A novice clings to a losing position, sacrificing piece after piece in stubborn hope. A master knows when to tip their king, not because they've given up, but because they respect the game and themselves too much to waste moves on a battle already lost. Now apply that to modern arguments. How many hours have you burned trying to convince someone who wasn't listening? How many online threads have you scrolled through, fingers poised to type, when disengaging would have been the real power move? Stoic withdrawal isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about refusing to let conflict waste your finite time and attention. Seneca compared life to a banquet. When the meal grows stale, a wise man leaves. He wasn't advocating flakiness, but the discernment to know when your presence no longer serves the conversation. Here's the challenge. Think of a recurring argument in your life, maybe with a relative who always picks political fights or a coworker who turns every discussion into a debate. Now ask what would happen if just once you didn't take the bait, not with a dramatic exit but with calm disengagement. I hear you. Let's revisit this another time. Watch how the dynamic shifts when you're no longer a willing participant in their drama. Because the truth is, most arguments aren't won by the loudest voice, but by the person who refuses to play the game at all. Withdrawal becomes art when it's neither passive nor resentful, but a declaration of boundaries. Imagine a colleague who constantly dismisses your ideas. Instead of escalating, you might say, "I'll wait until you're ready to discuss this productively," and walk away. That's not retreat. It's raising the cost of their disrespect by removing your attention, the currency they were counting on to fuel the conflict. The Stoics knew this secret. You can't control others, but you can always control your presence. And sometimes the most powerful statement you'll ever make is silence followed by absence. Try this today. Identify one argument in your life that's become more habit than dialogue, a circular debate where no minds change, only temperatures rise. Then experiment with strategic withdrawal, not as a defeat, but as a reclaiming of your time and peace. Because the unshakable person isn't the one who fights every battle, but the one who chooses their battles with the precision of a surgeon and walks away from the rest without looking back. Every insult is training material, not just something to endure, but raw fuel for growth. The Stoics didn't just tolerate obstacles, they transformed them, like a blacksmith hammering red-hot iron into a sharper blade. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the heart of antifragility, a modern term for what Stoics practiced 2,000 years ago, the art of growing stronger under pressure, not just surviving it. Picture a blacksmith's forge. The metal doesn't complain when struck by the hammer. It embraces each blow, knowing the force is what reshapes it into something unbreakable. Think of the last time someone underestimated you. Maybe a teacher dismissed your potential, or a coworker took credit for your idea. The sting was real, but here's the Stoic reframe. What if that moment wasn't a setback, but secret training? Every dismissive comment could be conditioning your patience. Every unfair critique might be honing your clarity. Even outright hostility teaches you something invaluable: how to keep your cool when others lose theirs. Epictetus, born into slavery, faced cruelty most of us can't imagine. Yet he wrote, "There is only one way to happiness, to cease worrying about things beyond our control." Notice he didn't say avoid those things. He said stop letting them control you. That shift turns obstacles into gym equipment for the mind. Consider a recent challenge, a missed promotion, a failed project, a relationship fracture. Now ask, what skill did this force you to develop? Maybe rejection taught you to communicate more clearly. Failure might have revealed a blind spot in your planning. Even betrayal can train you to discern trust more wisely. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat suffering, they simply refused to let it go to waste. Like compost, the rotten moments of life can fertilize your next growth spurt if you're willing to sift through the mess for the nutrients. Here's the practice. Grab a notebook and list 3 recent setbacks. For each, identify one way it made you wiser, tougher, or more creative. No lesson is too small. Stuck in traffic, that's patience practice. Overlooked for a team, opportunity to advocate for yourself. The goal isn't to pretend hardships don't hurt, it's to mine them for their hidden gifts. Because the unshakable person isn't someone who avoids storms. They're the one who learns to sail in winds that would sink others. And every insult, every obstacle, every ounce of resistance. That's just the universe giving you another rep. Libraries don't just store books, they curate silence. That hushed atmosphere isn't an accident. It's a deliberate choice to honor the weight of words. The same principle applies to Stoic communication. Every sentence should earn its place, like a rare volume allowed onto those sacred shelves. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, set the standard. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we listen twice as much as we speak. But here's the modern twist. In an age where everyone's fighting for airtime, the real power lies in knowing when to add to the conversation and when to let the quiet do the work for you. Take meetings, for instance. Picture 2 colleagues discussing a project. One interrupts constantly, eager to prove their expertise. The other listens, nods, and finally speaks with a single sentence that cuts to the core of the issue. Who commands more respect? The Stoic isn't silent out of timidity. They're selective out of strategy. Their words act like precision tools, not blunt instruments. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this daily, reminding himself, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Not, is this clever? Or will this impress? Just does it serve? Now, flip the script to digital spaces. How many texts, comments, or emails have you sent that didn't clarify, connect, or contribute, just filled the void with noise? That reflexive lull in a group chat, the nitpicky correction of someone's minor error, the 11th message in a thread that could have ended at 5. Each one drains attention without adding value. Stoics measure speech by a simple metric. Does it improve upon silence? If not, it's not worth the breath or the bandwidth. Here's the challenge. Tonight, replay your day's conversations like a film critic reviewing a movie. Which lines advanced the plot? Which were just background chatter? That offhand joke at a coworker's expense? Did it lighten the room or just reveal your insecurity? The unsolicited advice to a friend, was it a lifeline or a lecture? Epictetus warned, first learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Because when you start treating words as currency, spending them only where they'll yield real returns, you become the richest person in any room. Not in volume, but in impact. The next time you feel the urge to speak, pause, hear the library's quiet, then ask, will this sentence deserve its place on the shelf? Your life is your loudest argument. Think about the last protest sign you saw versus the last person who quietly fed the hungry in their community. Which one lingers in your memory? Stoicism has always been a philosophy of action, not performance. Mother Teresa captured this perfectly in her famous poem. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish motives. Be kind anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. That relentless commitment to virtue, regardless of recognition or results, is the essence of letting actions eclipse words. The world is full of people who will debate ethics over dinner but walk past a homeless person on their way home. Stoics measure themselves by a different standard, not what they proclaim, but what they practice. Epictetus drove this point home with characteristic bluntness. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. He didn't mean never speak your truth. He meant prove it first through your choices. Imagine two co-workers discussing work-life balance. One delivers a passionate TD-style monologue about burnout culture during lunch, then stays late every night chasing promotions. The other leaves at 5 p.m., sharp to coach their kids' soccer team, never once lecturing about boundaries. Who's more convincing? The Stoic knows that consistency between words and deeds isn't just integrity, it's persuasion at its most potent. Take climate change as another example. It's easy to share infographics about carbon footprints while ordering fast fashion and binge streaming shows. Harder but far more impactful to repair clothes instead of replacing them, or choose a walk over an Uber when possible. The quiet actions accumulate into a credibility no viral post can match. Marcus Aurelius modeled this as emperor, writing in his private journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." He didn't need press releases about his humility. His refusal to wear purple robes or sleep on silk pillows spoke for him. Here's the challenge. Pick one principle you care deeply about: compassion, honesty, sustainability, and spend a week embodying it without announcing it. No social media posts about the meal you served a struggling neighbor. No humble brags about returning lost cash. Just silent, consistent action. Notice how it reshapes your relationships when people don't hear your values, they witness them. Because the ultimate Stoic argument isn't won in comment threads or conference rooms. It's won in the 1,000 small moments where you could cut corners or seek applause, but choose instead to let your hands do the talking. Will this argument matter on your deathbed? That jarring question is the essence of memento mori, the ancient Stoic practice of remembering mortality to deflate ego and clarify priorities. Picture yourself walking through a cemetery, reading tombstones etched with names and dates. Each one marks a life that once burned with passions, grudges, and convictions just as fiercely as yours do now. Yet here they lie, silent, the insults they suffered, the battles they waged, the righteousness they clung to, none of it carved into the stone. That's the humbling power of this exercise. When you confront the inevitability of your own tombstone, petty conflicts lose their grip. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, put it bluntly, "You act like mortals in all you fear and like immortals in all you desire." We rage over trivial slights as if we'll live forever, yet waste precious time as if our days were endless. Imagine applying this lens to a current conflict, say, a feud with a neighbor over property lines or a social media spat about celebrity gossip. Now fast forward to your final hours. Will you wish you'd spent more energy on resentment, or might you crave those wasted minutes back to spend on laughter with loved ones or quiet sunsets? Here's the thought experiment. List 3 disagreements weighing on you right now. Then, for each, ask, if I had 1 year left to live, would this still deserve my attention? Most shrink to irrelevance under that light. The co-worker who took credit for your idea, the relative who always needles you about life choices, these aren't battles against others, but distractions from your finite time. Marcus Aurelius kept a skull on his desk not as morbid decor, but as a daily reminder. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. This isn't about dismissing all conflict as meaningless. Some principles are worth defending precisely because life is short, standing up for injustice, protecting those you love. But the Stoic distinction lies in discernment. Does this fight serve something greater than my ego? Will it echo beyond my fleeting years? If not, it's not a hill to die on, it's a pebble to step over. The graveyard doesn't judge which quarrels were noble. It only asks, did you spend your limited breaths wisely? Try this tonight before sleep. Reflect on one tension from your day. Play it out to its logical end, past the raised voices, past the need to win, all the way to your last heartbeat. Does the victory still taste sweet? Or does it dissolve into the bittersweet truth that time, not pride, is the currency you'll wish you'd hoarded? That's the gift of memento mori. It doesn't just silence arguments. It teaches you which ones were never worth having. So there you have it, 20 ways Stoic thinking silently wins every modern argument, not by overpowering others, but by mastering yourself. These aren't just tactics, they're a toolkit for invisible victories. Unlike conventional winning, where the goal is to dominate or prove a point, Stoic triumphs measure success differently. Did you keep your peace? Did you grow wiser? Did you walk away with your integrity intact? That's the real scoreboard. Think of it like chess. The amateur obsesses over capturing pieces, while the grandmaster focuses on controlling the board. Stoics play the long game, where the prize isn't applause but unshakable clarity. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned hardship into wisdom, left us with a line that sums it all up: no one can harm you without your consent. Let that sink in. Every insult, every provocation, every heated debate, they only land if you grant them permission. The person who controls their reactions owns the room, even if they never raise their voice. That's the silent power of Stoicism. It's not about avoiding conflict, it's about redefining what victory means. Here's your challenge. Pick one principle from these 20 to practice daily. Maybe it's pausing before reacting or asking, will this matter on my deathbed? Perhaps it's the discipline of strategic withdrawal, knowing when to step back from battles that don't serve you. Whatever you choose, commit to it for a week. Watch how it transforms not just your arguments, but your entire approach to friction. Because the goal isn't to win every debate, it's to lose fewer nights to resentment, fewer mornings to regret. If you're ready to go deeper, to turn these principles from ideas into instincts, hit subscribe. We're just scratching the surface of how Stoic strategies can help you navigate modern chaos with calm and confidence. Because in a world full of noise, the quietest minds often speak the loudest. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next time someone tries to drag you into a storm, you don't have to follow. You can be the eye of it instead.